Now you may have gotten a chance to see my Toyota RAV4 video that covers all the detail. If you haven't watched that, because I'm just going to give you a brief overview on the RAV4 itself and then cover the TRD off-road specific elements so we don't take up too much of your time. Let's get started. Oh yeah, that filter is lit. Much like the TRD off-road package, this is yet another trim level that Toyota has slapped on most of their newer models. And according to one of the VPs from the company, it's to offer buyers a little bit more excitement, more choices. It keeps the brands hot. And that's exactly what I feel like when I'm in this. And to be completely fair, I just did a Toyota RAV4 video, and this is identical in every single way on the interior, so I'm going to cover the pros and cons briefly. The first, the way that you utilize everything on the interior space, from the HVAC controls, the physicality of everything, including the shifter, there is no guesswork here. And it's one of those nice vehicles you get in where you know how everything works without having to spend hours and hours trying to figure it out. So that's great. The next thing is it's pretty durable. All these surfaces still look good. They don't look super cheap, but they're easy to clean up. They'll take abuse. They will take usage over the course of your 10-year ownership if you buy this. And that is more than likely why you would look at a RAV4. Now, let's get into some of the other details. Now, before I move on to the negatives, let's talk about some of the other great things. Usability. I can fit my large Portillo's cup in the center cup holder area with zero fuss, with room to spare. There's nooks and crannies for everything. Like my phone can go in this center storage area. If you have a wireless charger, it sits in there well. It doesn't slide around. And again, functionality is as good as you're going to get in a vehicle of this type. Now the negatives are basically, like I said in the other RAV4 video, Toyota is so far behind in their graphical user interface, their technology implementation, this new wave of design with sticking a screen on the dash that looks like a third grader designed it. It just feels and looks super, super cheap. Camera resolution's bad for backup cameras, and this is the trade-off. You get a great interior, you get a vehicle that you're going to keep for a long time, but these certain aspects just do not age well. But let's head into the shop and we're going to talk about some of the TRD specific things that you get with this. Hi, I'm underneath the Toyota RAV4 TRD Off-Road package or trim level. If you want to know all the details about the new RAV4, watch the previous video. So I'm going to cover the changes they made here. One, it has 8.6 inches of ground clearance. However, it does not have any underbody protection. No skid plates, the departure and approach angle have not changed. So this is not going to be rock crawling. But they have made some changes to the suspension, which is basically three things. One, it has TRD springs and revised spring rates, and it has TRD dampers, which have a fancy little stamp on the outside body. They've changed the compression and rebound. They've changed the bump stops. So if you're on a trail, you're getting all this wheel travel, it's not going to hit the bump stops as quickly as the traditional RAV4 model. The last thing that they've changed in terms of suspension tuning is the Falcon Wild Peak semi-off-road tires. Now, this is not going to be, tearing up serious off-roading, but it's good enough, and there's a good enough amount of meat on here to drive on the street and go on a trail again. So the last part is the torque vectoring differential. They claim to have slightly retuned it, and it was already tuned great to take care of multiple conditions, but this allows you to do downhill descent control. It has a mud and gravel and all of that. So if you're really going off-roading, it's capable of sending power to either one of these wheels exclusively. So 100% of the torque to the rear left, 100% of the torque to the rear right, or it can decouple itself completely and just go front wheel drive. But that's all electronically controlled. But that's enough of that. Let's take this for a drive and see how it operates. The RAV4 TRD Off-Road. The same negatives are here from the previous RAV4 video I did. There's some strange transmission performance. It gets a little bit herky-jerky once in a while. The stability control system is far too aggressive. If there's any amount of wheel spin, what it'll do is just completely cut the power from the engine, and it will progressively feed it back in, but there's times where it feels like it's running on 2 cylinders rather than 4 if you break traction. And with these off-roadish tires, it makes it a little bit worse. The last negative part that carries over is this engine is far too rattly. They need to figure out how to control NVH from it, either with engine coverings or more coverings in general, because one of the things is this is such a refined product for this class. The engine is just too noisy. But again, that's a carryover from the other RAV4 video. Now, with the TRD specifically, you're buying this because you want a little bit more off-road capability. You get higher ground clearance, you get retuned shocks and springs, and you get tires that are more suited for trails. And that's what you would buy this for. If you're in a bad climate, like Alaska or something where you get a lot of snow or a lot of sand, the torque vectoring differential that's in this, which is also in the higher trim levels of the other RAV4s, it does a much better job than a traditional on-demand system because it's more flexible that way. So this would be the model that you would get if you're in really bad conditions. Now the other part is, of course, it tows up to 3,500 pounds, so you can tow some smaller stuff like PWCs. And the reason you get this is if you don't want a much bigger SUV that feels bigger, that is a lot heavier, gets worse fuel economy, this eliminates the need for most people to get like a 4Runner or another Toyota product like that, where that's far more truckish. Now the last part to talk about is, you have this suspension set up. This is not something you're gonna whip around corners, but surprisingly, even with these tires, it does a good job. Thanks to 1, the suspension tuning, and 2, the torque vectoring differential. The ride quality hit that you get from having more wheel travel and the suspension that is more accommodating for off-road use is you get a 10%, in my approximation. The ride is about 10% worse, which means it's a little bit more truckish. It doesn't handle, it doesn't smooth out larger undulations, and it doesn't feel as smooth and as compliant over most bumps. You get just this little jitteriness to it. And that, again, it's like a 10% difference, and most people are never going to pick up on it. Now, the tires are quiet so far, but it's only got 1,500 miles on it. As tires like this wear, they're going to get progressively more noisy, but I feel like they did a good job of picking the tire compound to make sure this is not going to distract you when you're driving. Now, the last part is acceleration. There's a little bit of torque steer that comes off of this. It doesn't particularly matter how you're driving. If you're turning and accelerating, you feel it tugging just a bit, which is the only driving thing that annoys me besides from the engine noise. And again, this is a really good product overall. I think they're giving you another trim level that makes the RAV4, the person who wants the EV-ish car, the plug-in hybrid version. They have a hybrid version, which is powerful and great fuel efficiency. They have a naturally aspirated engine like this, where you don't want to deal with any of that. You're going to keep this a long time. They have something for everybody, and that's exactly what Toyota is trying to do with this. So let's get into the final thoughts, and we'll talk about the pros and the cons. Final thoughts on the TRD off-road package for the RAV4. So here it is. Toyota is getting more and more inventive with all of their cars and SUVs to create these different trim levels. And the trim levels go from the poverty spec for somebody that doesn't want to spend a lot of money, all the way to the TRD version, which this starts at 35 and ends at 40, the way that this is optioned out, and that is a ton of money. Now the thing is, they are doing their best to try to keep people inside their family of vehicles. So I talked to Jack about this. He's like, well, if you get a base model and you love it and you don't want to go outside of the Toyota lineup, but you still want a RAV4, they're trying to invent these new trim levels and all of this to keep people interested in the product. Now, in the case of the TRD, at least this, it's not offering a whole lot. I mean, it's just doing springs, dampers, tires, and wheels, and that's something you can do in the aftermarket. And there's no skid plates. There's not really anything that's going to make this more durable if you need to take it off-roading. So this is doing the same thing that the other trim levels are doing for the most part, and the subtle tweaks to the rear differential are not noticeable on the street at all. Now, it still rides good. I think they found a great balance between ride quality, wind noise, all of that. It's just, they've massaged this car just enough to get the mainstream buyers interested in it without it being a total cookie cutter appliance on every single level. And that's why they sell so many, and that's why people are loyal to it. It just works. And I think that's the best part about the RAV4, even the TRD version, whether you want this or not. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.